Before any Ford mechanic spends a single dollar on a used F-150, they run through the same checklist every time. Not because they learned it in school, because they learned it the hard way standing in front of disassembled engines, holding parts that should have been caught at purchase, doing the math on repairs that wiped out every dollar of value the truck appeared to have on the lot. I have been working on Ford trucks for over 16 years. I have seen every version of this story. The guy who bought a clean-looking F-150 with a cold engine start and drove away not knowing the cam phasers were already rattling. The owner who paid private party price for a truck that had been in a flood and had the paperwork to hide it. The person who got a great deal on a high-mileage EcoBoost that turned out to need a turbo, a walnut blast, and a transmission service before it was actually reliable. Every single one of those outcomes was preventable, not with luck, with a checklist. Today, I am giving you the exact 13-point inspection process a Ford mechanic runs through before buying a used F-150, the things we look at, the things we listen for, the things we pull out of the history that the seller is hoping you never think to ask about, and the specific findings that make us put the keys down and walk away, no matter how good the price sounds. This checklist has saved me from bad purchases. It has saved people I know from bad purchases. And by the end of this video, it is going to save you from one too. Let's get into it. Before we get into the checklist, hit subscribe and turn on the bell notification right now. Every week on this channel, we cover Ford ownership from the inside maintenance, repairs, inspections, and the knowledge that used to require knowing the right mechanic personally. If you are buying a used F-150 or thinking about it, this is exactly the channel you need in your feed before you hand anyone a check. Subscribe now. Then let's go through this checklist together. Check hashtag 13. Pull the vehicle history report AND. Know what to actually look for. Every mechanic starts here, and not for the reason most people think. Most buyers pull a Carfax or AutoCheck report looking for accidents. Accidents are relevant, but they are not the most important thing in that report for a used F-150 specifically. What a mechanic looks at first is the ownership and registration history. How many owners has this truck had? A two-owner truck where the first owner kept it for 6 years and the second for 3 tells a completely different story than a truck that has been through 4 owners in 5 years. Frequent ownership changes are one of the most reliable indicators of a vehicle that has been giving people problems. Owners do not typically sell trucks they love. Multiple short-term ownerships on the same vehicle is a pattern worth taking very seriously. The second thing a mechanic looks at in the history report is the gap between recorded service events. A truck with consistent oil change and maintenance records showing up at regular mileage intervals suggests an owner who took care of it. A truck with large gaps, no recorded service for 2 years, then a burst of service records right before listing, suggests either deferred maintenance or a deliberate effort to freshen the paper trail before a sale. The third thing, and this is the one most buyers completely miss, is the registration location history. A truck that spent its first 4 years registered in a northern Salt Belt state and then moved south is a rust risk regardless of how clean it looks on the surface. Southern states rust differently than northern states, and a truck that spent its formative years in Michigan or Ohio being driven on salted winter roads carries a different underbody condition than its clean exterior might suggest. Walk-away signal, multiple ownership changes in a short period, large unexplained gaps in service history, or a significant portion of the truck's life in a known Salt Belt region without documented undercoating treatment. Check hashtag 12. Cold start AND. Why it has to be cold. This is the check that dealers and private sellers most commonly try to interfere with, which tells you exactly how important it is. A mechanic insists on a cold start, not a warm start, not a truck that has been running for 20 minutes before you arrived. A genuinely cold engine that has been sitting overnight or for several hours. The reason is specific and non-negotiable. The most expensive failure on a high-mileage EcoBoost F-150 cam phaser wear announces itself almost exclusively on cold startup. When the engine is cold, oil pressure takes a moment to fully reach the variable valve timing components, and a cam phaser that is worn or has a sticking VVT solenoid will rattle audibly during those first few seconds before oil pressure builds. The rattle sounds like a brief metallic clatter from the top of the engine, sometimes described as a diesel-like tapping that typically fades or disappears once the engine warms up. That disappearing act is exactly why a warm start hides it. By the time the engine is warm, oil pressure has been doing compensatory work on the cam phasers for 20 minutes and the noise is gone. The seller hands you the keys to a running truck that sounds perfectly smooth, and you have no idea that a $1,500 to $3,500 cam phaser job is waiting for you in the first 30,000 miles of ownership. Beyond cam phaser, a cold start also reveals oil leaks that burn off once the engine gets hot, cooling system issues that show up as white exhaust smoke on startup, and idle quality problems that the engine management system compensates for once everything is at operating temperature. Walk-away signal: any metallic rattling from the top of the engine on cold start that fades as the engine warms. Any white smoke from the exhaust that is not simply condensation. Any rough idle that does not smooth out within the first 30 seconds. Check #11. Pull the oil cap A&D look inside. This takes 10 seconds and tells you more about how a truck was maintained than any service record a seller can hand you. Remove the oil filler cap on top of the engine and look at the underside of the cap and the inside of the fill tube. What you find there is a direct reflection of the engine's internal condition and maintenance history. A well-maintained engine with regular oil changes shows clean metal with perhaps a very thin film of normal oil residue. Light golden or tan-colored deposits are acceptable. Thick, dark sludge-like buildup on the underside of the cap, the kind that looks like chocolate mousse or dark peanut butter, is the calling card of extended oil change intervals. Sludge in the oil system means sludge in the oil passages, and sludge in the oil passages means restricted flow to the cam phasers, the turbocharger bearings, and every other component that depends on clean oil pressure. A sludged engine is not necessarily dead, but it is a truck that will cost you significantly in maintenance and early component replacement to bring back to reliable condition. Milky, gray, or frothy residue on the oil cap is the most serious finding. This indicates coolant contamination in the engine oil, a classic symptom of a head gasket failure or a cracked head. On a high-mileage EcoBoost, this finding alone is sufficient reason to walk away from any price. Walk-away signal: heavy sludge buildup on the oil cap or fill tube. Any milky, gray, or frothy contamination indicating coolant mixing with oil. Check #10. Check the coolant reservoir color A&D level. This one takes 30 seconds and covers a failure mode that is invisible from the outside of the engine. Ford's coolant specification has changed across model years, and the wrong coolant or mixed coolant types creates a chemical soup that corrodes the cooling system from the inside rather than protecting it. Pull the coolant reservoir cap on a cold engine and look at the fluid. Correct Ford coolant, depending on the year, is either orange or yellow-green. What a mechanic is looking for is coolant that appears brown, rusty, or contaminated, indicating the cooling system has not been serviced in a long time, that incompatible coolants have been mixed, or that internal corrosion is already occurring. The level also matters. A coolant reservoir that is consistently low without visible external leaks is a red flag for the same reason we covered with oil internal leaks into the combustion chamber, the most common cause being a failing head gasket on high-mileage examples. Also check for a white crusty residue around the reservoir cap or on the outside of the reservoir. This residue is dried coolant that escaped when the system overheated or pressurized abnormally, a historical record of a cooling event the seller may not have mentioned. Walk-away signal: brown, rusty, or heavily contaminated coolant. White residue around the reservoir cap indicating prior overheating, a level that is consistently below the minimum line. Check #9. Inspect the transmission behavior, specifically the 10R80. The 10R80 10-speed automatic transmission in many modern F-150s is a capable unit when properly maintained. It is also a transmission with a documented history of issues that show up in specific, identifiable ways during a test drive. A mechanic pays attention to three things during the transmission evaluation. First, how the transmission behaves during light throttle, low-speed transitions, specifically the 1-2 and 2-3 upshifts at gentle acceleration, shuddering, hunting between gears, or hesitation at light throttle on these low-speed shifts is a documented symptom of torque converter shudder, often caused by degraded transmission fluid or contaminated fluid from extended service intervals. Second, whether the transmission shifts firmly and cleanly under moderate acceleration without slipping, flaring, or hesitating between gears. Any slip, a brief RPM rise without a corresponding increase in vehicle speed is a serious finding. Third, how the truck downshifts under deceleration. The 10R80 should downshift smoothly and progressively. Clunking, banging, or a harsh single downshift event during deceleration suggests internal wear in the valve body or clutch pack degradation. Check when the transmission fluid was last serviced. Ford's official recommendation varies, but most technicians recommend a fluid service by 60,000 miles under normal use and sooner under towing or hard use. A truck with 90,000 miles and no transmission service history is carrying a maintenance debt that will come due sooner rather than later. Walkaway signal, any shudder during light throttle acceleration, any slip between gears, harsh or clunking downshift, no documented transmission service on a high mileage truck. Check #8. Get under the truck A&D. Look at the frame A&D underbody. This is the check that takes the most time and reveals the most information, and it is the one the fewest buyers actually do. A mechanic gets under the truck on a lift if available, on a creeper or the ground if not, and evaluates the underbody condition systematically. The first thing to look at is the frame rails. Light surface rust on a truck from a northern state is normal and not concerning. Deep pitting, flaking rust that removes material when you press on it, or rust that has compromised the structural integrity of the frame, visible holes. Deep wall penetration is a safety issue that no price makes acceptable. The second thing is the exhaust system. Rust at the pipe joints, at the catalytic converter connections, and at the muffler tells you about the truck's environmental history and about how many expensive exhaust repairs are in the near future. The third thing is fluid leaks. Fresh oil on the underside of the engine, transmission, or differential indicates active leaks that the seller may have cleaned before showing the truck. Run your finger along the underside of the transmission pan, the differential covers, and the engine oil pan. Fresh, clean oil that has traveled a short distance is an active leak. Old baked-on residue that has clearly been there for years without active dripping is historical and less immediately urgent. The fourth thing is the condition of the CV axle boots on 4x4 models, the condition of the brake lines, and whether any suspension components show unusual wear or damage. Walkaway signal, frame rust that involves deep pitting or wall penetration, multiple simultaneous active fluid leaks, damaged or cracked brake lines. Check #7. Evaluate the turbo system on EcoBoost models if the truck has an EcoBoost badge. The turbocharger condition is a dedicated inspection point that goes beyond what the general engine check covers. With the engine at operating temperature, a mechanic listens for a faint whining or grinding sound from the turbo area under light acceleration sounds that indicate bearing wear inside the turbocharger itself. A healthy turbo should be audible as a clean, smooth whoosh or whistle under boost. Any grinding, scraping, or inconsistent sound from the turbocharger housing is a warning. With the engine off and cold, physically grab the turbocharger's inlet and move it gently side to side and in and out. There should be minimal shaft play. Noticeable lateral play or in and out movement indicates bearing wear inside the turbo that will lead to failure under continued use. Check the intercooler and charge pipes for oil residue. A small amount of oil film inside the intercooler piping is normal. This is where PCV vapor deposits. Excessive oil pooling or heavy oil residue inside the intercooler indicates a more significant PCV system issue or turbo seal leakage that is sending more oil than normal into the intake system. Ask specifically about any history of P0299 code's turbo underboost, which are often the first diagnostic sign of a developing boost leak or early turbo degradation. Walk-away signal, any grinding or scraping sound from the turbo. Significant shaft play on physical inspection. Excessive oil pooling inside the charge pipes or intercooler. Check #SICK. Test every electronic system A&D the SYNC infotainment modern F-150s or rolling computers, and electronic issues can range from minor annoyances to expensive module replacements. A mechanic tests every system methodically, not randomly. Roll every window up and down. Test every door lock individually. Cycle through every sync screen and confirm the touchscreen responds properly across the entire surface. Dead zones or sluggish areas indicate a failing touchscreen. Confirm the backup camera displays cleanly. Test the heated and ventilated seats, the heated steering wheel, and the heated mirrors. Check that all exterior lights, including bed lighting, function correctly. On FordPass-equipped trucks, ask whether the system is still connected and functional, and whether there are any pending software updates that have never been applied. The reason electronic testing matters more than most buyers realize: sync module replacement, window regulator motors, door control modules, and heated seat element replacements are all repairs in the $300 to $800 range individually. Multiple electronic issues on the same truck compound quickly into a repair bill that erases the apparent value of a deal. Walk-away signal, multiple simultaneous electronic failures, a sync screen with significant dead zones or freezing, backup camera that does not display or displays incorrectly. Check #5. Inspect the tires. They tell you about the suspension, and the history of the tires on a used truck are a data source most buyers only partially use. Most people look at tread depth and move on. A mechanic reads the entire wear pattern. Uneven wear across the width of a single tire, more wear on the inner or outer edge than the center indicates an alignment problem. Alignment problems indicate either a suspension component that is worn or bent, or a history of impact damage that knocked the geometry out of specification. Either way, there is an underlying cause that has not been addressed. Cupping or scalloping a wavy wear pattern around the circumference of the tire indicates worn or failing shock absorbers. On a high-mileage truck that has never had shocks replaced, cupping on the rear tires specifically is a common finding that tells you a $400 to $700 shock replacement is in the near future. Check the date code on the tires, the 4-digit number stamped on the sidewall indicating the week and year of manufacture. Tires degrade chemically regardless of tread depth, and tires more than 6 years old carry elevated risk of sidewall failure regardless of how much tread remains. A truck with old tires and worn shocks is carrying a suspension maintenance debt that needs to be priced into any offer. Walk-away signal, significant uneven wear indicating unresolved alignment or suspension issues. Tires more than 7 years old regardless of tread depth. Check #4. Run a live OBD2 scan. Not just for codes, every mechanic carries an OBD2 scanner to a used vehicle evaluation. And they use it for more than just checking for active or stored fault codes. Plug in the scanner before the test drive and read every stored code, both current and historical. Cleared codes that have been recently erased show up as recent readiness monitor resets on many scanners, indicating someone cleared the codes shortly before showing the truck. A truck with all monitors reset recently and no historical codes is suspicious, not reassuring. Beyond codes, a quality scanner in live data mode during the test drive reveals information the dashboard never shows. Live coolant temperature confirms the thermostat is opening correctly. Live fuel trim data shows whether the engine is running lean or rich in a way that suggests a vacuum leak, a failing MAF sensor, or an injector issue. Live transmission temperature data during the test drive confirms the transmission is not overheating under normal conditions. On EcoBoost models, live boost pressure data during acceleration confirms the turbo system is building the expected boost level. Boost pressure that falls short of specification under full throttle is the earliest possible indicator of a developing boost leak before it has produced a P0299 code. Walk-away signal, recently cleared codes with all monitors reset, active fault codes for major systems, live data showing consistently abnormal fuel trim, coolant temperature, or boost pressure. Check #3. Inspect the body for evidence of prior accidents or flood history. This one requires a combination of visual inspection and some knowledge of what factory paint and factory fit look like, because the goal is identifying repairs that have been made and not disclosed. Run your hand along every panel gap, door to fender, door to door, hood to fender. Factory gaps are even and consistent. Repaired panels often have slightly different gap widths or slightly different angles that are detectable by touch and close observation even when the repaint is excellent. Look at the paint under direct sunlight or under a shop light at a low angle. Repainted panels often show orange peel texture differences, slight color variation, or overspray at the edges that is visible under the right lighting conditions. For flood history, which is particularly important on late model used trucks given the number of flood vehicles that re-enter the market after major weather events, look under the carpet in the cab. Pull back the driver's side floor mat and feel the carpet underneath. Flood-damaged vehicles often retain moisture under the carpet long after the interior has been cleaned and dried. Check the lower door sills for mud or silt residue in the corners and seams. Look at the seat rail bolts for rust inconsistent with the rest of the interior. Check the spare tire well under the bed floodwater that entered the cab also entered there and often left sediment. Walk-away signal. Inconsistent panel gaps indicating significant prior bodywork. Any evidence of mud, silt, or rust in locations consistent with flood exposure. Moisture under the carpet. Check tag 2. Verify the 4x4 system functions through all modes on a 4x4 F-150. The four-wheel drive system needs to be tested through every mode. It is not just confirmed that it engages. Find a safe, low-speed location and cycle through 2H, 4A if equipped, 4H, and 4L. Each mode should engage cleanly without grinding, without warning lights, and without unusual sounds from the transfer case or front differential. The transition from 4H to 4L requires a complete stop and should happen smoothly. Listen specifically for clicking or grinding from the front end when the front wheels are engaged and turning. Front axle clicking that increases with steering angle indicates worn CV joints, a $300 to $600 repair per side that is worth knowing about before purchase. Also engage 4L and make a slow figure 8 in an empty lot. The tight turning radius in low range stresses the front CV joints and front differential in a way that reveals developing wear that might not be audible during straight-line driving. A 4x4 system that hesitates to engage, produces warning lights, or makes unusual sounds under any of these conditions represents a repair that can range from a simple encoder motor replacement to a transfer case rebuild, depending on the root cause. Walk-away signal. Any warning lights during 4x4 engagement. Grinding or refusal to engage any mode. Clicking from the front axle under steering load in 4x4. Check #1. Have a trusted, independent Ford specialist do a pre-purchase inspection. This is the check that every mechanic does on trucks they are not personally qualified to evaluate, and the one that matters most for anyone who does not have 16 years of Ford-specific experience to draw on during the inspection. A pre-purchase inspection by an independent Ford specialist, not a general shop, not the selling dealer, but an independent technician who works specifically on Fords and has no financial relationship with the seller, costs between $100 and $200 at most shops. For a truck being purchased at private party or dealer prices in the $25,000 to $50,000 range, that $150 investment is the highest return expenditure in the entire transaction. What a specialist inspection provides that a buyer's personal checklist cannot is access to a lift for a thorough underbody inspection, factory-level diagnostic tools that read deeper into Ford's module architecture than consumer OBD2 scanners, experience with the specific failure patterns of specific model years, and an unbiased second opinion from someone whose only financial interest is your continued business. The sellers and dealers who refuse to allow a pre-purchase inspection are telling you everything you need to know. A truck in good condition with nothing to hide presents no risk to a seller from an independent inspection. Resistance to a pie is resistance to scrutiny. and scrutiny is exactly what a major purchase deserves. Walk-away signal: any seller who refuses to allow a pre-purchase inspection by an independent shop of your choosing. Outro 13 checks. Most of them take under 5 minutes. The cold start costs you a scheduling phone call. The OBD2 scan costs $30 in equipment you will use for the life of the truck. The pre-purchase inspection costs $150. The total investment in running this checklist completely is under $200 in an afternoon. The cost of skipping it and buying the wrong truck is measured in thousands sometimes in a truck that costs more to fix than it was worth when you bought it. The mechanic who runs this checklist does not find a perfect truck every time. What they find is a truck where they understand exactly what they are buying, where the risks are, what the maintenance debt looks like, what the next 3 years of ownership will actually cost. That knowledge is the advantage, and now you have it. Hit the like button if this checklist is going on your phone before your next used truck walk around. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss what we cover next. Now here is my question for the comments. Which of these 13 checks do you wish you had done before buying a used truck you regret? Pick the one that hurts the most. A. The cold start. I bought a truck warm, it sounded perfect, and the cam phaser rattle showed up 3 weeks later on a cold morning. I am still paying for that decision, and I want every person reading this comment to learn from my mistake. B. The OBD2 scan. There were stored codes that had been cleared right before the sale. The check engine light came back on within 2 weeks of purchase, and the repair was the first thing I paid for as the new owner. C. The pre-purchase inspection. I skipped the $150 because the truck looked great and the seller seemed honest. The underbody rust and the leaking differential cover that an independent shop would have found in 20 minutes cost me over $1,000 in the first month. Drop your answer below. I read every comment. And if you are actively shopping for a used F-150 right now and you want to talk through a specific truck you are looking at, the year, the mileage, the engine, what you have found so far, put it in the comments and let's figure out whether it is a buy or a walk away together.